because the hardest time I think is to come back when you have a new baby. And they made my job so challenging and demanding that I knew why I was here and why I was choosing to be here. So I think part of it was the opportunity General Mills presented me with and then supported me through.
Welcome to Create New Futures, thought-provoking conversations with leaders, experts, and interesting minds. Join us as we explore ideas and reflect on practices that you can use and apply to create and shape the future. With your host, author, and strategy consultant, Aviv Shahar.
Welcome to Create New Futures, where we develop conversations with successful leaders to explore how you create a new future for you and for your organization. This is Aviv, and today I'm speaking with Colleen Soukup, Chief Procurement Officer and Supply Chain Transformation Leader at General Mills. Colleen is responsible for global sourcing of all categories, and in her second role, she leads the transformation of supply chain to make it as agile and as future-ready as can be. I have initially collaborated with Colleen when she took the CPO role some 6 years ago, and recently we collaborated again as she developed with her team the next 5-year horizon vision and strategy. Colleen is both a focused operational leader and a great people leader. She has a way of bringing in people their best ideas and creating an environment where all team members can express their best talent. So I'm delighted to have Colleen here today. Colleen, it's great to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you, Aviv. I'm excited to have this conversation.
What did I miss in this introduction?
I think the only aspect I would bring in, because I think it's an important part of it, is I'm also a mother and wife and work at a place that has allowed me to be a mother, a wife, and a successful business person. So I feel like you only talk about half of me when you talk about just the business side. So I would tell you I've had many lessons from the other half also.
That's awesome. You're a whole person, and the beauty that we can explore is how to actually create a career like this, and specifically, what is it about General Mills that enabled you to lead a career like this? But let me first dive in by asking you, of all the things you do at work, what do you enjoy the most?
So I like learning. I've discovered over time that I'm a lifelong learner. And in my job, there is something new to do every day in some aspect, particularly as I've gotten more global, some aspect of culture, context, or ways of doing business that has kept me engaged, excited, and still learning. So I think I boil my job down to any day where I get to do something different, think differently about some opportunity, or learn something different about General Mills, our people, or how we're doing business across the globe is a good day. So I'm lucky in that I've been here a long time and I'm still learning. That keeps me highly energized and engaged.
What would be an example of a recent learning that energized you, whether it's about the business or about the people or about your role or about anything?
Yeah, so probably this is not going to be a rocket science one, but I thought it was very impactful. We started a transformation of moving from region to global, and we developed a very specific source to pay process. We trained people on the source to pay. We told them how to do their work, how they needed to work together, and went through it in 3 stages. And the first stage very much focused on the process and the ways of working. And when I kicked off the second wave, my reflection was, even though we taught everybody the same thing and the same process and protocol, some were very successful with it and some had struggled. And like I said, not rocket science, but it highlighted that it really was all about leadership, not about the process and not about the capabilities and not about the source to pay. Some people took the source to pay process and engaged and built teams and were successful. Some took the source to pay process in teams and struggled. And so from then on, I talked way more about leadership and change and connecting more than I talked about the standards and the processes. So I think that learning, despite having all this ways of working and getting even more detailed and specific, boy, leadership is still a critical factor of success when you're trying to build teams and when you're trying to lead change.
Indeed, this is a fascinating insight and very much can be corroborated by my experience and how we approach the work we do. The foreground shapes the background and the background shapes the foreground. So we work on business issues, and through that, we're able to build a whole new level of collaboration in the organization. And we also discovered that the best way to update and download new ways of working together is also by looking at business problems. So that is an important insight about transformation, because it's not that there is no relevance to doing other organizational and team exercises, but they are always more effective when you do them in the context of the business issues you're trying to solve, because people are driven by intent, by purpose, and by meaning of the work they do. So that's what I heard in what you're describing.
Yeah, I think change is imminent, right? And so those that see it as an opportunity to shape and lead versus an opportunity to fight and to criticize, one is way more rewarding than the other. And I found it interesting who stepped into that opportunity to shape and lead and define versus those who sat back and were not as excited and therefore in some regard don't bring their participation and their great ideas to making it happen, which is unfortunate, but I saw enough of the great energy. And then those that figure it out, they're forever changed. They now believe they can take ambiguity and direction without specifics and lead and shape people towards something that's different. And I've seen muscle and capability grow in people that sort of looked at change and embraced it and decided to shape it versus sit back and decide if they want to join it.
Wow, that's just such an important distinction and a differentiator in the work environment. And we often, and we talked about it with your team, I believe last time we met, this clear realization, clear distinction. You cannot just do your job. I mean, you used to be able to just do your job, but these days you need to do job 2 and job 3, which is job 2 is transform your work. If job 1 is do the work, job 2 is transform the work, and job 3 is transform you yourself. That is very much where you started, where you said, I am a person energized by learning. So as long as I'm continuing and learning new ideas, new ways of looking at problems and new ways to move an organization forward, I'm growing, and therefore everything else will continue to transform and evolve. That is just such a different, I would call it, operating system than showing up to work to merely execute what's been decided before and follow the brief.
Yeah, I recently heard, I think it was Microsoft that says they've transformed from a know-it-all to learn-it-all.
Uh-huh.
And that really struck me because if I think about a know-it-all, I've done it, there's nothing I can learn, seems so limiting versus I can learn more. And there's got to be different ways and better ways to do things. And so I just think about that as even as you engage your teams, a know-it-all would be somewhat stifling, and we can learn it all is empowering and confidence in the ability for others to learn.
It's a great framing. You talked about being able to lead a career like this with a senior role and being a mother and a wife too. So what are some learnings from what enabled you to develop the arc of your career in this way and somehow live and create a whole person, a whole balanced. You may say, you may argue with the point of balance, but I will assume that you've been able to hold all these plates spinning all at the same time. And what are some key learnings and key insights about that journey?
Well, for sure, it's a team sport. So I have to point at General Mills allowing me to do both. I think, a bit of a pioneer. I've been here 37 years, so it was one of the few that would take a maternity leave in my early days and actually come back. So I think General Mills allowing me to grow and flourish. 2 of the 4 times I came back from my 4 children, I came back to promotions, which I think speaks to forward thinking of, yes, you have potential, and we're betting on you coming back and doing something despite maybe personal commitments. And they were absolutely very wise, because the hardest time, I think, is to come back when you have a new baby. And they made my job so challenging and demanding that I knew why I was here and why I was choosing to be here. So I think part of it was the opportunity General Mills presented me with and then supported me through. And then I've been lucky to have a husband, a mother, and father-in-law, and various people that have supported and made it a community to raise my children. And so I feel really blessed that I was able to participate in the way I did, but also keep my career going. And somewhere along the line, and I don't know why, I figured out I had a brake and an accelerator on my career. And I had to be comfortable putting the brake on sometimes when, there was too many children under a certain age, or et cetera. I got comfortable with braking, but not getting out of the car and having that conversation that, hey, I have enough right now. I'm learning, I'm developing, I'm engaged, but don't give me more. And sometimes they listened and sometimes they didn't. But I think that the deciding to stay in the car and using acceleration and a brake as I needed it was super important to me, and allowed me to sort of flex in and flex out as I needed to, both mentally and physically. So I would say great support all around me, and some willingness to be courageous about using acceleration and brakes.
Well, the metaphor of the car works great, because in addition to the accelerator and the brake, you do have the steering wheel yourself.
Yeah, that's true.
so yeah. That's why it works. I'm curious, what would you say your children say and feel about your exampleship and the way you have led your career? Not necessarily just each and every one of them, but in the aggregate, what's the impression? What's the legacy that you've created for them?
That's a good question. I don't know that I've answered that. I think in general, they're very proud that I've been able to achieve something that was a lifelong career, being very successful. So I do know that they see that and acknowledge that and understand maybe not all the nuances, but that women don't often get to these places easily. So I think all of them would acknowledge that and be proud of that. I think they would say I've worked really hard, and that would be true. So I think they would say the high level of work ethic. But I think I also would say that they would say I participated in their lives pretty actively. So I would think they would say it was fairly balanced, but I haven't ever asked that question. So I don't know if that would be their 2 cents. I do know they're very proud of me, and they get excited when I advance or do something different. And they're very gracious about sharing my excitement. But I don't know if they would say there's been times they wish I would showed up more differently. I hope not, but I've never asked it.
Yeah, very nice. But that sense of pride is special.
Yeah.
When you came to the CPO role, you were known as a successful operator, successful operational leader. And when they needed something to be done, they always knew that Colleen would get it done. So then you came into this role, the CPO role. How did this role change you as a leader?
Oh, that's such a good question. So it's interesting, when I first came into this role, they said, do you want to coach, and what do you want to coach for? And I said, I want to do the job for a year before I asked for coaching, because I'm not sure what I would have been coached on at a director is the same coaching I'm going to need as a leader now. And it wasn't. So I, of course, could get the operational side down. I've been here long enough. I know how to get work done. I think the surprising thing for me, and maybe not surprising, but was that I needed to really work on my communication and prioritization and that side of it. And I think actually it started me on the future vision work, because I realized, as you know, when you're the person that talks and there's a lot of people listening, what you say can't be about how you feel that day necessarily, or something you just thought up overnight. It has to be more directional, more visionary, more enthusiastic. Well, enthusiastic is the wrong word, but motivating and encouraging. And I realized, you know, I was going from activity to activity, problem and solution, and I might weave that into my story versus getting a really strong drumbeat about what was important to me, what is important to our organization, and where we needed to go. And it really, that aspect of it led to a year of working on my communication, which really was then, well, what's your message? As much it was how you did it. And so that really started with, gosh, I want to have a compelling vision, and I want a compelling story for people to attach themselves to and feel the impact they're making. And that really started some of the early vision work. So I guess if I think back to what shaped me was making sure I was working on my backhand a bit. And in that, I think it started to evolve, not just what skill set do I need, but something broader, which is, you know, who do I want to be? And the skill set got me there versus, you know, I went thinking about I needed communication. And what I realized is, no, I needed actually to have a better story and a more robust way to talk all the time about what we need to achieve. And so a bit of a divergence off what I thought I needed, but I think I was on the right track.
Telling a story, being clear about the message of the story, and weaving a story that will enable the people engaging with you in your organization to find themselves inside the story.
Correct.
You also said the other element was priorities. How did you work on priorities, and what was the sense of that? Was that in the context of being able to both look at the strategic long term and the near term, what we call Horizon 3, and then translate that into Horizon 2 and Horizon 1, or was it a different altogether exercise?
No, I think that's definitely part of it. You know, being a lifelong learner, you may send an organization after lifelong learning activities versus direction, just based out of interest. So I wanted to be more careful with what I initiated and what I started. And yet at the same time, I wanted to advance and move our organization forward. So I think the priorities more were some discipline on my part about making sure I was pointing people towards a forward position that I wanted them to start thinking about, versus just one that I read recently and was more topical. So it was a bit more of a discipline on myself to say, just because I read something and it's interesting doesn't mean I should send an organization after it. Right. And therefore, my words were important, and my direction was important. I don't think I needed to direct, but I wanted to make sure when I called out a coordinate we wanted to get to, that people understood that there's freedom to getting there, but you know, we wanted to sort of get to that landscape or Horizon 3, as you mentioned.
Yeah, this describes the importance of being thoughtful, being intentional, and being outcome driven as a leader.
Yes.
Because as you said, you can get interested in one thing or another, and it's very easy to bring it up, and before you know it, you have a whole group of people doing the late night shift, producing slides because Colleen had an idea that she thought about.
Yeah. Yep. That could happen.
Yes.
Theoretically, yes. Yeah.
Yes. What's been also fascinating for me in observing during our recent collaboration, the work with you and with your team, was that my general outlook says that about 3 or 4 out of 5 senior executives, when they come to the role, they are already more or less fashioned. And you see them largely applying the muscles that enable them to get to where they now find themselves. The one out of the five is more the exception. And it was my impression that, as you're now validating, that you deliberately looked at the role, looked at the opportunities, engaged with self-inquiry, with self-awareness, to discover what strength you needed to use and where did you need to expand, and as you're describing, build a more disciplined communication. And also the way it appeared in our recent work together was trusting the process and leaning into ambiguity, knowing that that is actually how we get to unleash the greatest creativity in people. So what would you restate, or do you agree with this, that you're actually in this, I would say, the 15-20% that evolve in their role, as you already shared, but the majority don't. They actually use muscles that enable them to get to where they are.
Yeah. Oh boy. I hope I've grown a lot. Frankly, my biggest fear when I took on this role is that I wouldn't have everything our organization would need to be successful. And I think I shared that with the team. They said, what's keeping you awake? And I said, I want to be the leader this organization needs at the right time. And I do think there's time for many different styles and connections. And I think I'd like to look back and say I probably came at the right time to be both an operator, but also somebody that can embrace and looks forward to shaping change. But I think when you talk about, the process or the ambiguity and the connections and how was I thoughtful or not thoughtful, really, when I think about our vision as we started it, I had more themes in mind. One was which we wanted to be a community of connections because I'm a personal person. I'm an extrovert. I like to know the people I work with. And having a global organization, I knew that was going to be challenging. So I wanted to make sure that our organization had connections no matter where they sat, and wanted to model that connectivity in a modern world. So I do think that was an intentional piece of how I wanted to lead. And that was a development for me because I was used to seeing people face to face and influencing through relationships. And this pushed me to say, I got to figure out how to connect and lead and inspire beyond what I can see. And so that was definitely a development I had to figure out how to do. And then I do think probably my biggest growth and development was in what you said I allowed to happen, but it was the clearer I got about the future, not specifically, but directionally, the more I found the organization started filling in the blanks. I like to say we crowdsourced our vision, and people came forward with bigger, bolder ideas than I would have imagined. And I think the growth for me was making sure I kept the direction far enough ahead to allow that to happen, and then encouraging others to be bold and forthcoming with their ideas and their energy. And I think those were things I probably would have tried to direct in the past versus try to create an environment for them to happen. That definitely was an evolving of how I did work and how I led, for sure.
This is a big idea as far as I'm concerned with leadership, what you're framing there about directional clarity, and one that is free of the need to have detailed directives about everything. And that is part of the evolution of a leader, actually being comfortable in that space where you have a very strong intuition and sense directionally of where the organization is going. And you actually enjoy that it's not fully articulated on every aspect, because that is where the opportunity to bring your people into the equation and make it a co-creative, co-owned endeavor arises. So that is a very important big idea for leaders. What are some other guiding principles shaped your approach to developing your organization?
So, as I said, just some obvious things like how do we connect differently? How do we have a better inspiring vision that people can connect to, either because they built it or because it personally motivates them. I had to evolve how I led. So in all this, and I think you actually said this to me once, there's a time to lead from the front and a time to lead from behind and a time to lead by the side. And I found that was a bit of a different model for me. I wanted to always lead from the front. I'm comfortable leading from the front, but that idea of actually how rewarding it is to set people on their path and then watch them flourish and seeing that from behind was quite rewarding. Knowing when people need you to walk by them and knowing when, the conversation or the topic or the solution has to be somebody that stands in front and moves us forward. So I think that would be one of those learnings for me, was that I thought leadership was top down. And once you're in the role, first of all, you can't do everything top down, but frankly, there were better ideas in the ranks sometimes than mine. And so learning how to flex that muscle was super important to me. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it. That's still my lifelong journey, probably, because I like to fix things. But leading from behind and by the side of others have been probably the most rewarding thing I've done in my career. And a gift, frankly, to see some of those lean into that opportunity. So that would be probably my next key learning, was having a great team that took the opportunity that I was allowing them or pushing me to take that opportunity. And they took us much further than even I could see.
Well, talking about a great team, in our recent meeting, I think there were about 40 people in the room. And what impressed me was not only that if I remember correctly, about half or more were women. There was also every other aspect of diversity that I can think of present in the room, not just in terms of background diversity or nationalities diversity. There was also diversity of thinking styles and expression styles, and diversity of personalities, and diversity in terms of point of views and voice. And all these are factors in creating a high-functioning, strong team when you are truly enabling those different aspects of diversity to merge into a unified effort. How did you go about cultivating such a diverse team? What were some of the deliberate inquiries and strategies that you implemented to pull together a team like this?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. So first of all, I've only played team sports, so I believe in the power of a team very, very strongly. So I know what it looks like to sit on a team and both lead the team or support in different aspects of it. So I value that activity strongly. So I think of most things as, how do I make sure I engage and understand, and does everyone know the game we're playing? So I think that's just a personal bias and experience out of my years of playing sports. So I do think I have an aspect of that's in me. And then I think from there, honestly, I don't know if it's anything more magical than I appreciate different voices. I like I said, I'm a lifelong learner. I believe others that have done things different than I'm going to learn something from it. We purposely went out and looked for differential talent with different experience because I didn't think we had it or I had it. So it was more about building a full-fledged opportunity for us to be successful by having different expertise, different backgrounds. And as it starts to gel and you see the power of it, it's not hard to get excited about what it can be. And certainly all that has come to life. And so I feel quite excited about the team. And they're incredibly resourceful and resilient because they've gone through a lot of change and are stronger for it. And enjoying seeing that aspect of their leadership sort of come to the forefront. As a business world that's very dynamic, I feel like our team is better poised and comfortable and confident leading change or ambiguity because we've done that over the past 3 to 4 years.
And General Mills is really quite a unique company in the sense that many people care deeply about the company and about each other at work. What is this? What creates this culture and sense of passion? And what someone once said to me, people care here even too much.
Gosh, I don't know. Whatever it is, I would like to bottle it. It is definitely a commitment to doing the right things as a company and as people and for each other. And I've only really known General Mills, but everyone who comes here would say there's a deep thread of commitment to something bigger, whether it's our sustainability or how we engage and empower employees. But for sure, it's special. It's been special to me. It's been great for me, but I've enjoyed the people. I'm proud of who we are as a company. I'm proud of what we stand for. So I think that 153 years of who we are is just sort of woven into it. And as we bring in new people, we weave them in. And I think we have a really good development muscle. We prize and value leadership. And so we're always talking about how to lead and develop others. And I think that just starts to say there's a lot of really talented people that come here that are willing to be leaders. And I think that just, it's like a rock in a water. It creates ripples. And it's just a team that I have always felt like we always have really good people wanting to do the right things for the most part. I don't know anything different.
Is the Minneapolis winter a factor, and the fact that you get to experience minus 40 during the winter? Generally, that makes for sturdy and resilient people. So I know this is a generalized statement, but I wonder if just that is part of the ecosystem that creates that spirit that you experience.
That's a great question. I don't know that, but I can't imagine 153 years ago bringing wheat up and down the Mississippi was an easy job. So maybe that was started at day one and exists today.
Tracing to the beginning of your journey for a bit, what inspired you when you were growing up?
So I am a child of an entrepreneur. My dad owns a drugstore, and it was his grandpa's, or my grandpa's, I should say. So he was second generation. So I grew up in business. I knew nothing different. I did all kinds of things at the store, wrapping presents at Christmas, pouring coffee, counting money in the register, filling Hallmark card racks. So I grew up loving business. My dad will tell you, and my mom, that I sold seeds to buy a guitar. I wanted to have a booth myself at Crazy Day sales, sidewalk sales. So I grew up on knowing business was just who I was and knew nothing different. So I think the inspiration came from I had a family of entrepreneurs and business people, and that's what I wanted to be. And I don't think I ever really wavered from that from a very, very early age. So I would say that work ethic and love of business was just, I don't know, woven into me at an early stage.
The power of those early formative influences. And so how did you then start your career? How did you approach starting a career?
I went to a school in Minnesota, so left Nebraska and came to school here. And I was actually the second class of women in a school locally, which was the University of St. Thomas. And, things happen differently, but that was actually a really good training ground to be the second class of women in a previously all-male school. That was really good learning for my first few years in the business world, frankly, where there wasn't a lot of me in management roles. There wasn't a lot of women leaders to look to. So I often look at that as that was a really good training ground for transitioning into the business world. My first step in the business world and being successful was I was able to sort of understand the environment and figure out how to be successful in it. I was lucky in that I had similar interest to a lot of my counterparts. I like sports. I grew up playing sports. So I had some of the foundational things until our world began to change and be a bit more balanced on gender. But I had some early skills that came through my childhood that allowed me to be successful early, or at least be able to, join the conversation and be part of it. I think over time, to be honest, I started to figure out, that I could assimilate, but I wanted not to assimilate and be myself. And that was my journey to figure out, okay, how to be a mother and a woman and say I'm interested in shoes versus last night's game, and still be seen as being authentic and real and approachable and engageable. And so I just have to say it was a journey of deciding that who I am is much easier to be than assimilating to be successful. And over time, that's become obviously more the norm. And I didn't have to look for permission to do that. I just started to become more comfortable in my own skin and realized that was good enough. And it just was a different version of success than maybe I saw early in my career.
That's just such a powerful articulation, Colleen, of finding that sense of authenticity and being true to yourself, and that you don't need to be someone else or somebody else in the circumstance at work, because so many people do feel that they need to try to become somebody other than themselves. But then, of course, when you do that, you separate yourself from your strength, from what nourishes you, from your values and all those things. So was there a particular moment or event that crystallized that awareness for you, or it was more the case of a gradually coming into your own and finding your voice along the journey?
So I would tell you, I always had as I got into leadership roles, a heightened awareness that at many points I was maybe the first woman, or there hadn't been a woman before. So there was a heightened awareness on my part of making sure I showed up true so that others could show up true. So I would say, like small things like, school's starting this week, I'm not going to call 8 a.m. meetings because I know how hard that is, for any parent to make it in when there's a lot of restructuring going on in your personal life. But I think that maybe the one that brought it home the most was we were at a meeting, and it was kind of locally but off-site, and a person that's on my team kind of came in a little shook. Her husband was traveling, and her babysitter, whatever, there was one of her children was sick, and she says, but it's okay, she's there, it's fine. And I could tell it wasn't fine, and yet she was at a point of her career, I think she was like, I can't leave this is an important meeting, people are going to judge me if I leave. And I said, no, you're not fine, and I'm insisting that you go home. If things are good, come on back. If they're not, don't worry about it, but I insist that you go home. I'm not letting, it's fine, go. I don't think it is fine. And this person cried, which then I kind of felt bad about, because I thought, boy, I didn't mean to. And then the next day it was, no, you gave me permission to do what I wanted to do. And so it was a reminder to me where I had a heightened sensitivity that I was trotting that first pass for many, and I needed to make sure that I was really me, because only I would know what it was like to be a mother with a sick child. Because I was a mother with a sick child, I was one that maybe saw some things just from my perch of trying to be at home and be at important meetings and et cetera. So I think that was the moment where I thought I can't afford not to be caring about all the things that I always have and maybe have hid or didn't know if I should bring them forward. So I just got much bolder about those conversations and trying to make it an environment where people were judged on the results and et cetera, not some of the nuances that maybe I grew up knowing were important, but I didn't really believe. And I just think I got better at sort of sorting and representing and modeling. These are things that are important, and I have you as long as you're performing and delivering. Don't worry about some of these things that maybe were really not as important, even though we told ourselves they were.
It's a
I don't know if
special.
that makes sense, but
Yeah.
that was sort of the aha to me. It just was a call for action to sort of lead the way that I really wanted and believed I should, and just wasn't always making sure I was doing.
Yeah, it's a powerful story, and life is made out of those special moments where you make a different choice, where you listen to that instinct that says, "No, this is the right thing to do in at this point, in this situation," and tell this person, "No, you should go home and attend to what matters most." So the other question that surfaces through this is, what would you describe as another important influence or important moment in the integration of those two sides of leadership for you, which is the people side, which you just talked to, and the other side, which is the business side, delivering the numbers, delivering on your commitments, actually making the rigorous decisions to lead an organization to deliver sometime in tough, difficult market conditions. So this capacity to integrate the human side of leadership and the business side, but what enabled you to integrate these well?
So probably the most current is that our global journey. And I think for me, the business side was, I truly believed we were not operating at our potential, that our potential was not unknown or unfashioned. In fact, other companies had gone there. We just hadn't, based on a lot of business structural things over time. So I just had a deep-seated belief that we could deliver more value to the businesses. And then I went after what would that look like? What could it be? And frankly, got fairly fearless about, we need to do this fast. We don't need to convince everybody. We just need to start delivering differently, showing up differently. So for me, it was just deep down belief in our organization to drive bigger value than it was, but it needed some foundational things to change or look different to accomplish that. And, bringing some new people in that have done it before in different places helped us speed it through. Investing in some foundational work was an accelerator for us also. So for me, it was, I think, just a deep belief that we could do better and deliver more and show up better. But we needed to equip our organization across the globe with a better foundation and some clearance from our senior leaders to start operating differently. And once all those were in place, lo and behold, the team really elevated itself and has performed phenomenally. And the business is enjoying, the fruits of that labor. So that's been as clear as anything I've seen where we wanted to go. I'm not saying it wasn't hard work, because it was very hard work, but I knew we could do more for our businesses and supporting them. And I knew there was a better operating model that would get that out of our sourcing team.
What other teachable learnings from this global transformation would you distill?
Well, the couple things that I've had a few people sort of point at, you didn't talk about how much foundational work. We did a lot of foundational work, but we didn't lead with that because it tends not to be exciting or innovative or, necessarily value driven. But we did take care of our foundation first. And I think that was really critical to our success. But, more happenstance, we didn't lead with that. We led with, here's the results we believe we can deliver. And our 2-stage was more about what we would bring. But I think having the coalescing it that we needed to build foundational stuff was really a critical learning. So it's hard to build off of sand, that is true. And so taking care of the foundation, I think, is always a good start. That would be one thing I would tell anybody on a change journey. You can leapfrog a lot of things, but a foundation is still a foundation. And then I really think learning the change management piece is, that's a lifelong learning opportunity. And when I think of change, I mean the communication, constant communication of where we're going, why we're going, what your role is in what we're going is. You can't communicate too much I think that's been one of my learnings is communicate, communicate, communicate. And then I have one that I believe strongly in is the pause. In the midst of a lot of change, in the midst of chaos, taking the pause is, I think, a super important aspect, and just doing a couple things, whether it's celebrating wins, reassessing priorities, relooking at what needs to be done, but somehow carving out time to pause and take a deep breath and just reassess is, I think, super important also. And every pause I ever took, I got something out of that I think assured a better journey, either with different people or with different endpoints, or augmenting what we were doing, or with better communication. So those are things that I'll take in my change toolbox as I move into other change areas.
And you mean, when you talk about pause, you mean both at a personal level and collectively with the team, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Can I tell a story? So I
Sure.
went to a guy who trained dogs in Ireland. Just happened to kind of go off one of the side roads, and he did a demonstration where the border collie goes up in the hill, brings all the sheep down, and he talked about, there's nothing there, so how he used the dog. And they had puppies out, and the puppies would respond to the pause, the stop, where they would lay down and listen. And they were like 8 weeks old. And so I was saying, wow, I can't believe the puppies can already do the, pause. And he said, well, are you kidding? That's the most important thing to teach the dogs. And I looked at him and I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, usually a good dog, if they're meant to be a sheep herder, they know whether they should go left or right. You just have to get them to pause and think about what they should do next. And I took that home, and I have thought about that so many times. Of the right folks actually know what to do. You just have to get them to stop and think about it. And so I believe in the power of the pause, both personally and professionally. And it is definitely needed in change in a rapidly dynamic world.
Yeah, and it also says there is much we can learn from dogs, from horses, and yeah, there is a lot.
Shepherds, and yes.
So with all that you know today, what advice would you give your 25-year-old self?
Oh, geez. I'm like most people would tell my 25-year-old self not to worry as much, to get to my instincts and authentic self faster. I would tell them, you're not going to believe what you're going to be able to do. That hard work pays off, and you'll have no idea how hard you'll work, but how rewarding it is. And worry less and enjoy more, and get to use sooner. I think those would be the words I would tell my 25-year-old self.
That's great. If you were to lose all that you know and keep only 2 ideas, or only 2 capabilities, or only 2 practices, what would you keep?
Connections. How important connections are. I think no matter what I do, I feel like I couldn't operate or be successful without connecting with others. So I think connections would be probably at the forefront. So that desire to hear, see, and do what others know. And then I guess I do it as a trick, is that taking that learning side with me, because a bit of humbleness and learning, I think they go together. If you believe you know it all, you're not learning. And so I guess the ability to think I still have more to learn, despite 37 years of experience, I would hope I would never learn or lose that work in progress mindset. So I think the learning agility and the ability to connect with people would probably be my 2 things I would hope I would never lose.
Wonderful. Thank you, Colleen, for this rich exploration. As we bring this to landing, and I've seen you often at the end of a session bring poetry. So you can choose to bring poetry into this now, but in a broader, more open-ended way, what parting wisdom would you want to offer to people listening to Create New Futures?
Well, I think, and you probably did this at one or many of the ones that I was at, I've come to appreciate that, working at a 153-year-old company, this company, it's just I'm a chapter in its story, not the story. And I hope I've left it better than I started, and I hope that people see me as leaving a torch for them to carry forward, not a heavy bag, but light. Those would be my poetry moments of I hope I left it better than I came, and people and excited about the future as and when I leave General Mills. That's what I'll be remembered for.
Yeah, and I'd land with this thought that what you offer there is a whole mindset that we largely lost in the short-term hysteria of this day and age. But when we reflect back in history, you'd have one generation beginning to build a cathedral, recognizing that only the fourth generation down the line, they would actually be able to walk into that cathedral. So being able to see our work and what we do every day as part of a larger relay race is a powerful idea, is a powerful thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Aviv.
Here we are. We've landed this Create New Futures journey, and it's your time to take action, to create your new future. Here are a few steps you can take this week. First, Colleen identifies herself as a lifelong learner. She's energized by learning every day, learning about the business, learning about her organization, and about how to be more impactful. How are you committing yourself to learning and growing? What will you do this week to surface and capture and apply learning? How will you make learning an integral part of your everyday work? Second, Colleen observed that shaping and leading change is much more fun and rewarding than objecting and resisting change. And we know that what you resist tends to persist and to produce stress and even dis-ease. What opportunities are available for you this week to example and to embody leading and shaping change? How will you help your team decide where do they want to stand, and whether they choose to swim and navigate the river of change or try to block the river only to be overwhelmed by it? This is a choice we each make every day. Thirdly, Colleen pointed that to lead a whole life, one that includes a high-intensity career, being a spouse and raising a family, and do all that while you continue to learn and grow and evolve, that this is a community effort. Implicit in this idea is the realization that to become a community and cultivate such mutual support and help is a lifetime journey of many efforts and many deposits of care, of love, of devotion, and of making new starts together. How are you investing in your personal community? How are you enabling your family to operate as an intentional community of shared purpose that supports the growth and the development of each member? These are perhaps the most rewarding investments we can each make. These 3 ideas for you. Become a lifelong learner, shape and lead change, and nurture your personal community of mutual help and support, and you will never be left without. One more thing. You can reach me directly by phone and on email to discover how we can help you and your team create your new future. See you next time.